Hello everyone and welcome to this fifth video of the course Zbrush Basics. On this video, we'll focus on the brushes settings in order to get specific details when you make your sculptures. On the previous video, we had a look at the transpose, how we use it for moving, scaling, and rotating the objects. We used these three buttons up here for enabling those options. In order to use the brushes, we'll use this fourth option we have here, which is called Draw Pointer, and its shortcut is the Q key. When enabling this tool, we can see some menus around this area have been enabled. Also this brush icon. The transpose has been changed for the brush icon. In general terms, for working with the brushes, we have 6 options to take into account, which are all the options we see on this area. That works from the sculpture stage, meaning we can generate the object's volume, going through the painting, the color look, and finally the materials. How they behave according to the light bounces. For the sculpting, we'll work these 4 options you see here, starting then with Z-add and Z-sub. Z-add and Z-sub work as follows. Z-add enables the option for us to be able to add geometry to our object, meaning it modifies the geometry for generating high reliefs. When Z-add is enabled and we select the brush from this list, which we'll cover on the next video, we will just have to left click on the mesh of our object, or with a digital pen if you have one. When clicking, we can see how the geometry is modified. In this case, by using Z-add, we are generating the high reliefs. The more strokes we apply, the more we modify the geometry. Z-sub works the opposite way. When enabled, and we start applying strokes, it generates the opposite effect, removing material and kind of generating a fissure. As you can tell, these are quite important tools for us when sculpting. Nevertheless, you could imagine how tedious it would be taking the cursor over and over again, from the sculpture to the panel, making us waste time. So, that's something we have to avoid as much as possible. Reason why, there is a key shortcut for making the process fluent. In order to use it, you simply have to enable one of these options. In this case, Z-add, and by holding Alt, we carry out the opposite effect. In this case, we are removing geometry from the mesh. It works the same when we enable Z-sub. In this case, we're removing geometry. And if we press Alt, we start adding geometry, as you can see. The second option we'll work with will be intensity. This option modifies the strength of a brush when applying a stroke. It'll define how much the strokes will affect geometry. We've applied the previous strokes with an intensity value of 25. Let's increase it to 83 in this case, and let's apply some strokes. As you can see, the amount of geometry affected in this case is way bigger than the strokes we've applied previously. That's due to the intensity value is way bigger now, reflected on how the geometry was affected. The third option is focal shift. Focal shift works the following way. As you can see, our cursor has got 2 circles, an internal circle and an external circle. The internal one is referenced to the portion of the stroke we apply. That uses the intensity we've set here, in this case 27. So it's the area where the geometry will be modified. The external circle let us know the limits of the stroke when modifying the geometry. The area of influence. It means the intensity of the internal circle is 27 and it gets reduced towards the external circle until it becomes 0. Focal shift let us work with positive and negative numbers. The bigger the number is, the bigger the distance between the internal and external circle, as you can see. Which means there will be a range of smoothness when applying the strokes. The portion that was affected the most is smaller. That's due to, as you could tell, the internal circle got smaller, which is the area where the intensity is stronger, and we can see how the intensity is reduced on this area. That's basically what focal shift is about. We can also work using negative numbers. However, when we apply the strokes, even if we get a much bigger stroke, as we can see, some irregularities show up on our geometry. In this case, it seems it's got some cuts. That is caused by the focal shift. In this case, since we've made the internal circle too big, Zbrush generates these irregularities. This is part of the next video, but we'll use it now. When you see this kind of irregularities on the geometry, what we can do is to use a brush called Smooth. We use it by holding Shift. As you can see over here, the icon has changed. And we start painting over the object. As you can see, it smooths the irregularities. And our stroke is completely regular. The last option is called Draw Size. Draw Size defines the size of our brush. The bigger the size, the bigger the stroke will apply. Likewise, a smaller size for certain features of greater importance. The options we've just watched apply for digital sculpting. I mean, for creating and modifying the geometry of our object. Since this is a basic course, let's have a look at an example of how these options we have here work. However, we won't get too deep. For the time being, we'll see what RGB does, since it would be a little difficult to understand what these other options do at the moment. So, for the time being, let's proceed with the RGB channel. Normally, when we enable this option, what I recommend is to disable Z-Add or Z-Zap, since it's not a good idea to work with these two at the same time. When enabling RGB channel, we enable an extra panel automatically, called RGB Intensity. This option is very similar to Z Intensity, with the difference that Z Intensity only works with the sculpture, with Z Add and Z Zap, while RGB Intensity works only with RGB. Now, what we'll do is to start painting our sculpture. In this case, let's grab green. As you can see, we are adding some color to our object, and also combine them a bit. This option also works with Draw Size and Focal Shift. It doesn't work with Z Intensity, so in this case, we can increase the brush intensity. As we can see in this case, the strokes are quite blurred. This can be fixed using Focal Shift. In this case, when reducing the distance between these two circles, the borders won't be so blurred anymore, looking more solid and continuous. There is a shortcut for getting this panel in a close area to our cursor. We just have to press the space key, and as you can see, these are the same options we have available on the upper panel. I should mention the colors may vary depending on the material we are using, as we explained on the first video. However, since this is a basic course, we won't go over how to use the materials just yet. I hope this video is useful for you. I'd recommend to practice with the tools covered in this class, since we will actually use them on the next video, when we use the rest of the brushes. Hope you liked the video, and I'll see you then on the next one.